Right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Committee. First, I think the most important piece of information, this is a formal meeting, but gentlemen may remove their jackets. Welcome. In the interest of safety, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at the Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. For those of you who have not attended this committee before, I will explain the running order for this morning, and possibly this afternoon. After committee members have declared their interests and agreed the minutes of the previous meeting, I will announce each item and ask those of you who are here to make a deputation to come and sit at the table. After the planning officer has made the presentation for the application, individual deputies will have 6 minutes to express their views, and joint deputies will have 12 minutes between them to make their views known. After which, you will take no further part in the proceedings unless we need to ask a question to clarify a statement that has been made. Members will then ask questions, make comments, and the decision on the application will be made. Both members of the committee and members of the public are reminded of the need to consider material planning matters and not to refer to any personal information about other members of the public. If you do, I shall ask you to leave, and that is members as well as people in the gallery. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of those making deputations, but there will be some footage of those making deputations as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room while the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating quite explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Finally, may I ask everyone to use the microphones provided when they are speaking. The on-off button is the single button on the right-hand side. That concludes the introduction. Apologies. Do we have apologies?
Yeah, there's apologies from Councillors Susie Horton, Lee Hunt and Judith Smythe.
Right. And I also have an apology from Councillor Chris Atwell, who was standing in for, I think it was Councillor Horton, and he is unwell this morning. So we are slightly depleted, but we're still quarried. Next thing, declarations of members' interests. Councillor Donna Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I have a declaration of interest in item 4, which is the application by Portsmouth Football Club, because I'm working for Portsmouth Football Club as the Strategic Stadium Director, so obviously a conflict, so I'll be leaving the room for that item.
Thank you. Are there any others? Councillor Stubbs.
Just really for information of the other committee members, I did check with the monitoring officer yesterday whether Councillor Jones' declaration gave rise to a declaration for Conservative members, and it doesn't, so we don't have to make a declaration on this.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. No others? Yes.
From the officer's side of the room, in relation to item 3, for the sake of transparency, we will declare that the Democratic Services Officer lives in the vicinity of the application site but has taken legal advice. This presents no issue whatsoever to her undertaking her administrative functions at this meeting.
Thank you. We now move on to the minutes of 2 of our previous meetings. First, I shall just go through them page by page in case there are any corrections which people wish to make. Firstly, the meeting which was held here on the 20th of February 2019. First page, second page, third page, fourth page, fifth page, sixth page, seventh page, eighth page. Thank you. May I then have your approval to sign those as a correct record of the meeting? Thank you. We now move on to the Planning Committee meeting held on Wednesday the 10th of April 2019. Again, I'll take it page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. I therefore have your approval to sign those as a correct record. Thank you. Updates on previous planning applications. Sim.
There's no updates.
Right. Thank you. Chairman's notices, which I'm putting in at this point. Firstly, that although this meeting is being held at 11 o'clock on a Thursday, it is our intention to return to with the next subsequent meetings to the normal time of 1 p.m. on a Wednesday. Secondly, thank you all of those of you who attended the training yesterday evening. I have to announce that the training, which had been set for the 5th of June, has, for reasons which I suspect we all know, been cancelled, or at least it has been postponed. There will be training on the 25th of June, all-day training. This will cover legal matters. This is not compulsory, but it is certainly highly recommended, since if you do not attend and receive the training, you do lay yourself open to certain legal challenges. I think our legal services officer will expand on that.
Yeah, I'm conscious that most of you were in training last night, but for the benefit of others, the level of training and the fact that training has or has not taken place is a matter taken into consideration by the High Court on judicial review. So it's crucially important that all members sitting on planning committee are making the effort to go to training and taking what's said there, and coming back if they have questions about it in particular. So we thoroughly encourage you to go to that.
Councillor Jones.
I wonder if it would be possible for us to have a look at the agenda of what's been covered on the day on the 25th, because it might be that those of us that have done planning for several years might want to come to certain bits and not others. I know there's certain bits I'd quite like a mop up on, but other bits I probably feel more confident on. So
I see no reason why not. Mr. Manley?
Yeah, we can certainly get an agenda of what's being covered off. We'd want to see that anyway before we allow the training to go ahead. So yes, we can certainly get that sorted out for you.
Councillor Pitt?
Councillor Jones's suggestion is really helpful. I think especially anything that crosses over the internal training that we had last night, or as she says, the sort of day-to-day stuff, if we could package it so that maybe a morning session was more broad brush about for newer members, but the afternoon session or vice versa, that would be really helpful.
And that would have been the 5th of June repeated on the 25th. I assume that for those of us who are unable to attend on the 25th for any reason, training can be arranged at a later date.
Yeah, we can certainly get that the second date pushed on if there is a need. It all depends on the level of attendance for the first training session.
Thank you. We now move on to planning applications. First planning application is 29 Marmion Road. Will Mr. Eldred please come to the table? Thank you, Mr. Eldred. Can I have the officer's report on this matter, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Sorry. Planning permission is sought for the installation of an extraction duct to the rear or north elevation. The application relates to a 3-storey end-of-terrace building located to the north side of Marmion Road, at its junction with Wilton Place to the west. The ground floor comprises of a commercial unit which was granted permission for A3 use in February 2017, with residential to the above floors known as Clymer Court. The application relates specifically to the north elevation of the building, which acts as the main entrance to Clymer Court. Clymer Court consists of 14 residential units with access to a rear courtyard and garages fronting Wilton Place. Whilst the application cites neither a statutory nor locally listed building of architectural historic interest, it is located within the Owen South Sea Conservation Area. So this shows the principal elevation fronting Marmion Road of the unit. Here's the south elevation. And we've got the side with Wilton Place there and there. And this is the north elevation, and you can see this is the entrance to Clymer Court, and here is where the extract would be positioned. So the proposal would include the installation of an extraction system to the rear elevation of the building fronting Marmion Road, which acts as the front elevation and main entrance of Clymer Court. The flue and associated extraction system would be located approximately 2.5 metres above the ground and would be a wall-mounted system. The overall height of the equipment is approximately 9.6 metres high. Although the extract system would be to a residential frontage and would be visible from Wilton Place, it is noted that it would serve a commercial unit which was recently granted an A3 use in 2017. Furthermore, the application site is a modern mid-1980s building and is neither a statutory nor locally listed building of architectural historic interest. Paying careful regard to the significant historic character of the surrounding area, it is considered that given the proposed development would serve a commercial building within a largely retail area, the proposed development would not appear obtrusive in relation to recipient building or the wider street scene. Furthermore, given the location of the extract system to the rear of a modern building within a semi-enclosed courtyard, it would not be readily visible from the Marmion Road frontage. In addition, the extract duct would project a mere 10 centimetres above the main ridge height. A suitably worded planning condition would also be imposed to ensure an acceptable appearance was adhered to in regards to the colour and treatment of the ductwork. With regard to residential amenity, the Environmental Health Team are satisfied that the proposed extract plant and additional information provided regarding the system are adequate to control the odour and noise generated from the Class A3 use. A condition would be imposed to ensure this detail. For the reasons set out in the committee report and subject to conditions, the proposed development is considered on balance to be acceptable to the building and would preserve the appearance of the Owen South Sea Conservation Area and have no undue effect on local residential amenity in accordance with PCS 23 of the Portsmouth Plan.
Thank you. Mr. Eldred, you have 6 minutes to address the committee.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the committee today. I'm Christopher Eldred. I own 10 Clymer Court, Wilton Place, PO52DX. I object to the proposed planning application 19-00160 full, and I'm representative of some 17 similar objections from residents of Clymer Court and Wilton Place that have been made to you in writing. I object on the following 5 grounds. The development was never designed and not readily adaptable to accommodate the change of use. The proposed extraction duct is situated on the front of Clymer Court, proximal to opening residential windows, Velux windows in the roof, and is intrusive and detrimental to the street scene. The residents of Clymer Court and Wilton Place will be subjected to odours and fumes. The residents of Clymer Court will be subjected to noise and vibration from the duct and exhaust fan, and the proposal is not in keeping with the Clymer Court and Wilton Place within the Owens Conservation Area. So I'll go on and expand on those points. As stated by the officer, the Wilton Place Clymer Court is in the Owen South Sea Conservation Area. It's a quiet enclave of residential housing adjacent to Marmion Road, comprising terraced housing in Wilton Place and Clymer Court. As you see on the picture there, an 1980s development of 14 flats above 4 commercial shops. The enclosed Climal Court is overlooked on 3 sides by flats and 2 communal terrace areas used for socialising and recreation. It has 8 car parking spaces and 3 recycling bins. The commercial premises have a simple domestic style exit door straight into the courtyard with no space allocated for storage, waste, etc. My flat is situated at the western end of the development and most windows look out into this courtyard. This is not a location readily adaptable to the proposed use, and this has resulted in the proposed duct being located up the front of Climal Court. I've not found another situation in Southsea or Portsmouth when an extraction duct has been placed on the front of a building. Similarly, there's no room for waste storage, a safe access, air intakes, etc., which are all part of it. The proposed extraction duct is a 50 centimetre by 50 centimetre cross-section and greater than 9.6 metres straight up the front of this 3-storey building, as you can see there. It's within touching distance of the front door, adjacent to the letterboxes, intercom. It is on the front of the building. A silencer and flexible connections will also include somewhere, but it's not clear if this is external or not. If you are in any doubt that this is the front of the building, the proposer's own photographs and those on the screen at this moment in time shows you, we've got the 2-foot high lettering says Climal Court there. The ducting will be highly visible to all residents of Wilton Place and Climal Court as well as all passers-by. There is nothing subtle about this. The drawing attached to the planning application is a simplified representation that does not represent the reality. This is a piece of undisguised industrial design which includes brackets, joints, access hatches, silencers, cowling at the top, which is not shown on these drawings, with a jet extractor. Irrespective of the fact that it is painted, it will be both highly visible and an eyesore and not in keeping with the building or the local street scene. Would any members of the committee accept such a structure on the front of your house? Probably not. No information on the food to be prepared has been submitted, but even if it is what we anticipate to be Mediterranean food, there may include high odour, deep-fried, charred grilling, wood-burning, stoves, international foods, both now and in the future. No odour assessment has been carried out, and the level of odour control proposed may be insufficient and may require exceptionally high level of odour control. The size and shape of Climal Court and the prevailing westerly winds will encourage both downdrafts and turbulent air, resulting in odours at low levels and the adjacent Velux windows, which are not shown on there, within the roof of Climal Court. No computerised fluid dynamics modelling has been undertaken to satisfy the developer that this will not be the case, and the risk of perceived odour at sensitive receptors is real. It is stated that anti-vibration mountings will be used, but this is a partial mitigation. Noise and vibration at a range of frequencies will still be experienced by residents, and there's nothing to back up an assumption that noise and vibration will be acceptable. It should be noted that at this point that there's no coherent specification, detailed design documentation, engineering drawings or layouts supported by detailed modelling or specific calculations regarding the ventilation system as a whole and noise, vibration and odours to substantiate the proposals. Importantly, no alternative layouts and technical solutions have been considered by the developer to mitigate the valid and obvious concerns of planners and residents of this vent going up the front of a building. We would normally expect, in good engineering practice, for all developments where there are sensitive environmental considerations, and I believe there are sensitive environmental considerations in this case. So only the cheapest and crudest solution has been proposed by the developer. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, we, the residents of Climal Court and Wilton Place, object to planning application 19-00164 on the basis that Climal Court was not designed for such a purpose. Apologies. It was such a use and does not lend itself to conversion to such a use due to space limitations. The proposed exhaust duct is on an industrial design, is highly visible, situated on the front of the building and is not in keeping with a residential area, and the proposal is detrimental to the street scene of a conservation area. The close proximity of the residential windows, roof velux and community terrace areas means the proposals will intrude into residents' lives with odour, noise and vibrations. The proposals have not been carefully considered, designed and engineered, and alternatives considered, and as presented, I think they mislead the reader. Such a change of use just cannot be safely and environmentally accommodated. Thank you.
Yes, you went slightly over your 6 minutes, but never mind. We heard what you had to say. Members, questions? Councillor Norton, then Councillor Stubbs.
Okay, yeah, just two from me actually. The first one is, and we may be able to see this through the aerial view, the sort of Google Earth view there, is for officers. And is there windows on the roof? So as you look up, are there skylight windows on the roof of that building? Do we know? Can't see it from there. It doesn't look like it.
Okay. Yep.
Yes, there are. There are two Velux windows in the roof.
Okay. And then the second from me, if we go back to the original image that we saw. So on the side of the building there, next one if we could. And again. Yeah, so at the top there it seems to be a diamond shape. Is that ventilation or is it just there for aesthetic purposes? Is it functional?
Mr. Eldred?
It is ventilation to the roof space.
Okay. And so the proposed vent will be attached going over that, or will there be a distance from that ventilation to the vent itself, or is it going to cover it?
It will partially cover it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jones? Oh, sorry. Councillor Stubbs, then Councillor Jones.
Yeah, with regards to the Environmental Health Officer's comments and the second paragraph, where he says that there's been no information submitted with respect to noise. However, there's another report relating to the variation of condition, which is the change of use from retail into a different use, which does have that information. And my question is, how does that all fit together from the point of view of enforceability if this application is granted? Because this application, seemingly, doesn't have anything about noise in there, and it's this application, I assume, that overrides the condition in the other one. So how do these two applications fit together?
I think you have asked an interesting question, Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Councillor. So you were talking about the previous condition with the other application and so on. Yeah. I understand there was a discussion around that, and the route taken was, as this application was in, to try and deal with the technicalities in this application, and should this application be approved, we'd also want, for procedural reasons and neatness, to tie up the pending condition application, and if this application is approved, then presumably the same technical details would be submitted to retrospectively or to tie up and catch up with the previous condition. In respect of the noise issues, you pointed out that Environmental Health had said that no noise information had been submitted, but the colleague Environmental Health went on to say that they went on to carry out other checks, and clearly, I mean, in the round in general, as long as they've got enough information either submitted or available by other sources to double check on the veracity and adequateness of technical specifications, clearly that's happened in this instance. If they weren't happy, they'd be asking for more technical information or saying to officers we'd recommend refusal. In this instance, they are satisfied on both noise and vibration and odours that we're able to issue a recommendation for approval. Just going back slightly to the previous points from Councillor Norton, with the roof lights, yes, they're out of sight there, but I think that's why the flue goes right up to the ridge height. If it weren't for the roof lights, I mean, environmental health officers would look at that sort of thing. They're very, very careful to look around, not just on the host building, but other areas where there are recipients at height to make sure the flue discharges at sufficient height. So I'm absolutely sure they would have seen the roof lights on Clymer Court, and that probably explains why that flue discharges right to the ridge height and not just above the windows, you can see. So it discharges above the roof lights that are clearly on different roof slopes. So I'm sure they've taken that into account. And then lastly, you asked Councillor Norton about the vents, well spotted, on the apex of the gable there. that's a matter, I would say, that's outside the planning consent. If there's no longer possible the same degree of ventilation to the roof space, assuming that's roof space or indeed to residence flats, I don't think that would be a planning reason to withhold consent. I think that would be something else they'd need to sort out with the occupier and the owner of the building to make sure that still ventilation is suitable for that property.
Mr. Stubbs.
Just arising out of that, I'm just sort of throwing in as a bit of an open question. If we've got two planning consents, obviously you don't have to implement both. You could implement one and not the other. That would be entirely legitimate, and therefore whether we need another condition in here which copies across the condition from the previous application about noise.
Certainly, Councillor Stubbs, I think that could be a proposal which you might wish to make. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. There were two issues that I had written down following deputation from Mr. Eldred and also having read the report, and that is, the first one is around what is described as the front of the building by Mr. Eldred, and the second one for me was also around noise. And just to clarify, coming from a slightly different angle on the noise element, the report, and my question refers to the second paragraph of the Environmental Health Officer's comments as well. It says that no information has been submitted with the application around noise. However, a report from All Airtight and Noise Check has been submitted to discharge condition 3. So either information has been submitted or it hasn't, or are you saying that there was no initial information submitted with the initial application, but then they've submitted that since you came up with your proposed recommendations? Is that what it is? Or is that with reference to a different application? Because either they have submitted stuff around noise or they haven't, and paragraph 2, it's the environmental health comment, not yours, but it kind of contradicts itself a bit. Do you see what I mean?
So the original application for the A3 use did not consider any external vents extract. It was just simply a change of use. The agent tried to discharge a condition on there regarding the extract and the no cooking process condition. However, he was told that as we hadn't considered an extract system, he would need to formally make a planning application at this point for the extract system because it was not considered as part of a change of use application. So we had the information when he tried to discharge the condition, and it sort of carried through.
Okay, that makes sense now, thank you. Okay, which is why, because I was thinking, well, how can you discharge a condition when you haven't even got the flue up yet? And then I was starting to think, well, is it retrospective? Which obviously, by the sounds of it, it's not. It's because there'd been an application, a condition, and then now an application. Okay. The other question then, Mr. Eldred refers to the proposed flue being on the front of the building. And just to clarify, I think I know the answer to this, but for the interest of openness and transparency, from a planning perspective, you count the front of the building as being the Marmion Road elevation, and that back part of the building therefore then being the back, because obviously for their property, the front is as he's described it. But from a planning perspective and from the planning inspectorate perspective, does Mr. Eldred have a point on a flue being installed on the front of the building, which is quite unusual?
From a planning perspective, what we're doing is assessing the structure in context of the area. So I don't think it really makes a, we're not going to get tied up in what is the front of a building, what's the rear of the building. I think from your perspective as elected members making this decision, it's on that elevation, and you need to make an assessment as to whether or not you think that it's an appropriate position to put an extraction flue for this building in terms of its impact upon the visual appearance of that building and the character and setting of the conservation area. I wouldn't get too tied up in terms of what is the rear and what is the back, because I think because of a multiple use here, it's a little bit academic, because for one use it is the main elevation, for another it's the rear elevation. So I think we just need to take a step back and say, look at it from a perspective of impact of that on that building and the amenity impact that it has.
Any other? Councillor Atkins.
I'm quite concerned about appearance because it is quite large and it is, from the pictures, clearly quite visible. Is it at all relevant to planning? Is it something we could have asked about or considered whether or not it could have gone on the east elevation, or is that not something for us to get into?
Picking up that point, and one that was also raised by the objector, the application that we have in front of us is the one to be determined. So looking at alternative positions it could go, that's not for us to look at. We're looking at the application as is here. So you need to make an assessment of whether or not you think this is an appropriate development, having regard to the position of the proposed vent and the impact that has upon the visual appearance.
Two questions from the Chair. First of all, has any work been done on airflows? Because we have looked at a number of applications in this area and have been concerned about the semi-enclosed nature of the properties at the back. And here you have a semi-enclosed courtyard. You have an extractor fan only just above the apex of the roof. What effect will airflows have on this? Is there a likelihood that the downdrafts will carry the extraction down into this enclosed space?
Thank you, Chairman. Part of the assessment the Environmental Health Officer carries out is the velocity of the material, the air being sent out of the flue. So it's a function of height and velocity and other factors. So undoubtedly, again, the officer would have considered the particular nature of this site and the courtyard, as well as the height of the flue's discharge and the speed of discharge, and undoubtedly he would have come to the conclusion, enabling him to recommend that it was okay, that it would have been discharged sufficiently high and fast not to be caught, in his estimation, by any swirls or downdrafts, etc.
Thank you. My second question again concerns the acoustic testing and the vibrations. I've read the airtight noise check report, which says very little about vibration. Could you expand a little on how this flue will be mounted so that in order to minimize vibrations, because quite clearly vibration would affect the enjoyment of their homes of the residents close to?
Chair, there is in condition 3 on page 6, it does actually talk about the being a requirement for anti-vibration mounts to be put in place. So there is something that has been sought to be controlled by the Environment and Health Officer in relation to this, so that he is assessing it and making requiring that anti-vibration mounts be put on the structure so that it doesn't transfer vibration into the building.
Yes, I have read that, but if we look at this condition 3, can I have your judgment on how that will operate, and will it completely remove vibration from the walls, or will it just mitigate the vibration?
I'm not sure that officers would be able to expand upon that. We're not experts on that element of that. That would be for something, if you have obviously concerns about that, then it would be only a question that an environmental health officer could provide. However, in putting forward the condition with that in, what the environmental health officer is saying is that that will be sufficient as not to result in harm to the residential amenity of the occupiers of that property.
Are there any other questions, members? Comments? Oh, sorry, is that a question or a comment?
Question.
Okay.
Just in terms of once again, the kind of size and appearance and the conservation area element, you've obviously concluded that you don't feel that it impacts too heavily on the kind of conservation area. Could you just, obviously I've read your report and you feel that you can mitigate it by colour. Could you talk around on sort of how you weighed that up in a little bit more detail as to why you feel that was able to still be compatible with the conservation area to have quite a large industrial type flue on the exterior, visible exterior of the building? Maybe a little vague, sorry.
Sorry. So the application was discussed with the conservation officer, who determined it was acceptable. As I said, the building is not listed, not locally listed. It's a mid-1980s modern building. The main Marmion Road frontage, as you can see, would be unaffected because it would be positioned to the rear. That's really the main considerations there.
So is the road to the side is in the conservation area as well, or not? Is it just Marmion Road itself that's in the conservation area?
The whole site is in the conservation
The whole site
area.
is in the conservation. Okay. Sorry, one very final question. My last point is just, obviously the objectors have raised a number of points that, as in your report you say, are not relevant because they relate actually to the change of use application which was already granted. My question is just, is there any question that this should have been considered as part of a whole application to start with? Is it legitimate that they can be treated separately? Obviously, this duct appears to be necessary to support a restaurant on the ground floor, and so should that have been part of the original application in the change of use?
In relation to changes of use, the application, again, in front of them, of the officers at the time when it's granted permission, is the ones that they look at. Not all changes of use to restaurant uses actually require vents and ducting. It's dependent upon their actual operational needs. So we don't necessarily always insist upon it because there are other methods that are suitable for certain types of operations in terms of restaurants. They are obviously looking at their operation and thinking that they need a flue, and this is why they've actually come forward with this. So it doesn't automatically require flue details to be submitted as part of the original. That would have been assessed by the environmental health officer at the time when the application was first submitted for the change of use.
There was some mention in the report of this flue being part of satisfying a condition of the original application, or was there not?
Yeah, that's the question.
All right, Councillor Udi.
Sorry if this has kind of half already been asked. So, more of a hypothetical question for me. If the block of flats in question, Clymer Court, were built around the time of the rest of the architecture in Marmion Road, like similar architecture, high buildings with retail units underneath, would a planning application been accepted on the fact if a flume was going to go up on the side of one of those buildings, because that would be more in line with a conservation area?
Just checking with the Office of Clarification, the original condition actually said no cookie operations.
Subject to toasting.
It was, so basically it was restricting the cooking on the property, on the premises. Obviously they've now come in because they want more, so they want to vary that condition so that it allows them more cooking operations on the premises, and hence necessitating this vent going in. So the original change of use actually precluded any cooking taking place other than grilling, unless a vent was put in.
So this is not the application to vary that condition, though, is it? This is a preparation by first putting in the flue that would allow them to then apply to vary the condition, is that correct?
There is an application there was an original application to vary the condition.
Not varying, they're just discharging. So they're trying to discharge the conditions on the previous application, but because there were no external alterations considered then, they had to make this brand new application before they could discharge those previous.
If there are no more questions, members' comments. Councillor Udi?
I did ask a question that wasn't answered. Sorry, Chair.
From the chair, I think that we judge every case which comes up, whether it is old or new, on its merits, and it is virtually impossible for us to say, well, if this were an historic building of 1840 or 1890 or 1920, how we would determine it. We are required to determine this issue on the merits of this issue and this issue alone.
Could I just return with a slight comment? My understanding is, whilst this is in the conservation area, should we treat it, even though it's a late building, it's 1980s, should we treat it as such that it's within the conservation area and it's now kind of been taken in by that? Because I feel like that whether the architecture is newer and it doesn't look as grand as what originally was put in the conservation area, do you understand where I'm going with that?
Yes. Sim?
The application sits within the conservation area, and in your role as a member making a decision on this, you are required to actually assess the impact of the proposal on the character and setting of the conservation area. The fact that it's on a newer building is just one of the considerations. So what you're doing is you're looking at actually what's in front of you and think, will this preserve and enhance the character and setting of the conservation area? Will it cause harm? Am I unhappy with it, or do you think it's completely acceptable and that you don't think it would cause harm? So the fact it's on a newer building is a factor, but it's for you to make a judgment as to whether or not you think the installation that flew on the outside of the building will have a wider adverse impact. So you're entitled to make that consideration.
Okay, yeah, so I think on conservation grounds, I don't think this will enhance or preserve the area, so I'm happy to propose refusal on policy PCS 23.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Jones, thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Stubbs.
I have to say, looking at the application as a whole, there's always trade-offs in these things. One of the trade-offs is about bringing an empty building into use, keeping buildings in use. That is ultimately why we are seeing more restaurants and takeaways and so forth opening, is because the demand for retail is gone. So, I think that is also a consideration in this, and from my perspective, while I fully understand the concerns of residents, I also think that there are benefits in this scheme as well, and I'm going to propose a report.
Do we have a seconder for that? Also, it may be considered, I will formally second it. Sorry? Councillor Pitt.
Just to comment and to expand on Councillor Norton's comments a little bit in terms of why I'll also be supporting a refusal on this one. And for me, as Councillor Udi and in addition Councillor Jones have kind of teased out a bit, if we consider that the Climate Court itself as a building was deemed to be in keeping with the conservation area and therefore was granted permission at the time, where this rests for me is whether or not the addition of this flue means that this building that it's being attached to ceases to be in keeping with the conservation area by the addition of the flue, because it's about the aesthetics of the building. We've had an argument play out over where the frontage or the rear of the property is, and completely understand you can argue that from both directions, but for the residents who live in Climate Court, that is absolutely 100% and not in any dispute the front of their building. It's where they go in and out of it. The fact it happens to have the shop at the other end, it's only by accident. It would have been quite possible when originally built for Climate Court to have had a rear flat on that ground floor, and for the retail unit to have only had an accessible frontage on Marmion Road and no rear to it. So I think we've got to consider the nature of the building as a whole and not just the accident of design that enables that flue to feed the restaurant. We wouldn't be allowing it to go through somebody else's house inside. I'm not 100% convinced that the roof lights have been given that consideration. I've never spotted roof lights on that building, and it wasn't part of the report to say that there would be no impact on the roof lights. I'm also concerned that if that building's got a fire break in it halfway through where the apex of the roof is, to stop fire spreading between the two sides of the building, and this flue's going to be erected over the venting for the roof, then that venting could be split internally in two, and therefore could effectively be blocking all of the venting to one side of that roof. We don't know for sure around that. And if I lived on Wilton Place and saw that stuck on the front of a building opposite, I wouldn't be very happy, and I wouldn't think it's in keeping.
Councillor Udi.
I just want to thank Mr Eldred for his deputation today. It was very, very informative and gave a lot more information than I think we previously had. I want to just acknowledge the fact of Marmion Road and some units changing over, and there is a cultural uplift definitely happening on Marmion Road, and I'm very happy to see that. But I think the application today, as echoed by comments by Councillor Norton, Councillor Jones and Councillor Pitt, is just doesn't look great enough, and I'm concerned about the safety of the residents, as well as the fact that that residents deserve to live in a lovely place. And I think from where that unit is and putting where that flue is just, for me, quite hideous, to be fair. So I'll be...
Councillor Atkins.
Yeah, I think just to add my voice to what's already been said, I think this is very close. I think it's a very difficult balance, and to me the main concern is undoubtedly the appearance in the conservation area. I fully accept that the Marmion Road appearance is not affected, but the Wilton Place, I think, is quite substantially changed in character by having a large flue quite clearly visible on the front elevation of that building. And so I think in the conservation area, I consider that the intrusion of this particular application, for me, the balance falls the other way, and on balance, I think I agree with Councillor Norton that that policy PCS 23 would be grounds for refusing this.
Now, am I correct in this that there are two elements on which you wish to object to this? The first is a conservation area consent, that this is inappropriate development for the conservation area PCS 23, and secondly that you are concerned about the effect of the outflow on the building itself, the vibration on the building itself, and especially on the roof space and the Velux windows attached to that roof space. Would that be correct? Councillor Pitt.
Yes, but with the addition that we need to be very clear that the proposed development would appear intrusive in relation to the recipient building and the wider street scene. So it's our subjective view, which we're entitled to have, that this would not enhance the building or the conservation area.
Any further comment before I go to the vote on this? Sorry? Okay.
Okay. I think the issue you've got here is that, as you rightfully put, you can make, you're assessing the impact upon the visual appearance of the building. It's a very subjective issue, and it's for the members to make that decision as to whether or not they think it's visually intrusive, both either to the appearance of the property, which you've indicated you think it is, and also to the wider setting of the conservation area, which again is a decision you can make. In relation to the impact, the air quality and the noise and odour, that has been assessed by our environmental health officer, and basically that goes into the realms of it's more objective. If we were to try and refuse it on those grounds, we would struggle to have an evidential base against which to refuse that, it does cause us a problem because we're saying, well, our environmental health officer, in their professional opinion, has assessed that and considered it completely acceptable. So if you are to go down that route, then that would be against an evidential base and would be likely to be difficult for the officers to actually come up with an evidence base to counter that and support that an appeal. In terms of the first element, the visual impact, that is obviously something that you can consider. What I would say is that if we are going to go down the route, I know you've made comments about the impact, but we would need to tease out a little bit about the harm you think that's causing to the conservation area. So as far as I understand it, you are considering that it's the adverse impact upon the character and setting by reason of its height and location, size. It's just because obviously when we go for a reason for refusal overturning officer, we have to be very clear about what those are for any subsequent appeal.
In the industrial nature of it as well, I think it's a residential area.
Councillor Atkins.
I would fully endorse the officer's comments, and I would prefer to refuse this purely on the conservation area and appearance grounds. For me, it would be in terms of the size and the location on the building and the visibility from Wilton Place. While the area is retail, so not purely residential, but primarily retail according to the officer's report, I'm not sure this kind of more industrial type flue is so visible from the frontage of buildings and from street level in other locations on the site. So I think location on the building is quite important. Visibility is quite important. I think size is quite important because it is, after all, 9 metres and half a metre by half a metre square. So it's not an insubstantial thing that we're looking at here. It will be very visible and I think quite intrusive from the aspect along Wilton Place.
Councillor Udi.
Sorry to judge it back up. If we were not aware that there were Velux windows on the roof, do you think the environmental health officer might have had the same view of that as well?
I cannot tell, but I think that certainly were any further application to be made, this is a matter which would have to be taken fully into consideration if it has not been this time, and there is no way I know. Councillor Jones. Right, Councillor Pitt, then Councillor Jones.
Yeah, just to make sure that in the wording for why we are refusing, we need to be 100% clear that in our view, this is not appropriate for the reasons stated on the front of Clymer Court, because that's the key point here. If there's any argument made that it's at the rear of the building, then that could place the decision in jeopardy. I think we have to take the view that for the residents who live there is the front of their building. It's where the name of the building is, it's where they go in and out, and it's placing that on the frontage of the building, which is the main element of a refusal.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. I mean, I've been having conversations with Councillor Norton throughout this, and this is a very narrow area. I think that we need to make sure that the wording that we put forward is very specific, because this could well be overturned at appeal unless we are very clear. And for me, I think it's about the fact the commercial element of this corner block is at the front and a bit to the side, but mostly to the front. And the predominant residential for this building is at the rear. And the addition of a flue is a commercial feature to this building. And the outlook, not just for people that live, Mr. Eldred and his neighbours, but also the people that live in the residential properties that face the back of Clymer Court, they are looking at the moment residential, and they live in residential, and they will be looking at a very industrial feature, albeit it may be rendered in the same way, but it is tall, as Councillor Atkins has said. So I think for me, it's about the fact it's an industrial addition to a residential elevation of the building, which is very important. I think that's the best chance we've got of getting this to stand up at appeal, if it gets that far. And secondly, I wonder if Councillor Pitt would just give way on his second objection so that we just go on PCS 23 on the conservation area.
Fine by me.
To assist you, what I've done is I've just been listening to the points you've made, so I've come up with, off the comments you've made and put them together to assist in terms of coming up with a reason for refusal. The proposed development by reason of its size, design and prominent position on the front of the Climbing Court would introduce a visually intrusive and discordant feature to the detriment of the visual appearance of the property and would cause harm to the character and setting of the conservation area and would fail to outweigh any public benefits associated with the proposal.
Yeah, if in your second sentence, I think it was, or the first bit where you mentioned Climate Court, yeah, I think the key bit for me is that we have to refer to that as the residential portion of the building, you know, the residential elevation, the residential section, because that's for me why this is juxtaposed, because you've got commercial tying into residential at the rear of the property. Whether it's front, back, side, we had advice earlier that that's kind of a moot point, but I take it it's not for you. But actually, the fact that it is residential, I think, is the strongest. It's not that strong, but I think it's the strongest point we can hang this on, and then just keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Words can be residential.
We could, yeah. I mean, I think the point about it being residential, I think it is. It's a fair point. If that's what you want to include, we could certainly include that within the appearance of the residential property, or this mix. Yeah.
That was the discordant sentence.
Yes, so I think it's the discordant feature. So as long as you're happy, that what we can do is we can come up with that. The basis of that reason for refusal to, if that's what you're comfortable with. Yeah. Do you want me to read it again?
Go on then.
It's only actually only introducing a residential, but the proposed development by reason of its size, design and prompt position on the front elevation of Climate Court would introduce a visually intrusive and discordant feature to the detriment of the visual appearance of this residential property and cause harm to the character and setting of the conservation area and would fail to outweigh any public benefits associated with the proposal, contrary to PCS 23 of the Portsmouth plan. Are you comfortable with that?
Not really. I'd still like one more sentence added in at the beginning.
Can you use your microphone, please?
Sorry. Can you start again, and then can I interrupt you when you get to the point that I think we need to insert another sentence?
Okay, yeah.
It's just after Climate Court.
The proposed development by reason of its size, design and prominent position on the front of Climate Court would introduce a visually intrusive and discordant feature to the detriment of the visual appearance of the residential property.
Right. Can we stop there?
Yep.
The residential property, full stop. This is a commercial or an industrial flue or a flue to support an industrial. Not industrial, is it? It's commercial. So this is a flue to support a commercial activity on the elevation of a residential building.
Yes.
Do you want to say that again?
Yeah,
That's it.
I think there may be an easier way of dealing with it by.
If you put the word industrial before the word design,
Yes.
I think it covers it off.
Or
It says what Donna wants to say.
yeah, I think it's we could say utilitarian design or
It's industrial.
industrial. Okay. Okay, we could do that, industrial, so we just add in industrial to that. So
Industrial or is it commercial? Because don't forget, if this is going to go to appeal and an inspector is going to go, well, that's not an industrial feature, it's commercial. If it's commercial, we just need to, whichever word you think is right, I think it needs to be that word.
I think it is quite utilitarian in its design. So I think the point about it is what you're not talking about so much the design of it. You're actually saying, well, it's a visually intrusive feature on a residential property, which is a discordant feature. That's the point of what you're trying to say, is that it is causing harm by virtue of the fact that it is a residential feature and you're introducing a flue on it, basically.
Yeah.
Which is what I think you're trying to say. So if we were to say utilitarian or commercial, I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just say I'd steer clear of the word industrial because you might pick up the wrong connotations in terms of use classes.
Right, members. We'll take the propositions in the order in which they have been proposed. We have a proposition that from Councillor Norton, seconded by Councillor Jones, that this application be refused on the grounds which has been stated. Those who would support that, please show. Those who are against, please show. Those who are abstaining, please show. Thank you. The application is therefore refused. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Eldred. Okay, there will be a 2-minute break, okay, thank you very much. Mr. Smith, is Mr. Smith here? Would you be kind enough to allow us to look at item 3, which is for Kingsley Road, before we look at 45A High Street? And you have the time. You do?
That's Chairman, that's fine.
Because the resident who is making an objection to 35 Kingsley Road has other business in not a very few minutes. Thank you very much.
That's fine.
Romaine Spooner, is she here? Right. We're going to take Lydia Gardens Kingsley Road next, so that you can get to your next engagement. Mr. Smith has been generous enough to allow you to do that.
Norton just went outside the corridor to get some judge's box outside. He was called off by someone in another room saying not allowed to
They
use other
bought
glasses.
those, yeah, sorry, they paid for those ones. The fountain's been taken.
Right, members, we come to the application for 35 Kingsley Road, which is for change of use from a dwelling house, Class C3, to purposes falling within Class C4, house in multiple occupation, or a dwelling house. Can I, you're off the table, can I have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The area surrounding the application site is primarily residential, but in close proximity to the commercial area of Eastney Road. The site is characterised by rows of similar terrace properties and is located on the northern side of Kingsley Road and relates to a two-storey mid-terrace dwelling house. Internally, planning permission is sought for the change of use from C3 to purposes falling within C4 or C3. Internally, the property features a kitchen, bathroom, dining room and lounge at ground floor level and 2 bedrooms at first floor level currently. The majority of the internal layout will remain unchanged as part of the application, with the ground floor lounge being converted into an additional bedroom. So that would be the ground floor front-facing room with the bay window. Based on the information held by the City Council, of the 76 properties within a 50-metre radius of the application site, 2 properties have been identified as being in lawful use as HMOs. No additional HMOs were brought to the attention of the local planning authority, and including the application site within the total percentage of HMOs in the area would bring the total to 3.94%, lower than the 10% threshold, where an area is considered to be imbalanced. Further, the proposed development does not result in 3 or more Class C4 HMOs adjacent to each other, nor would it result in any residential property being sandwiched between 2 HMOs. It is therefore concluded that the proposed change of use would not result in an imbalance between HMOs and C3 dwelling houses in the prescribed area. Above you can see some photos taken back in March of the site. On the left is the front elevation of the property, and on the right is the rear garden area. And on the left there you can see a section of the kitchen and the dining room area on the right. And then on the left you can see bedroom 1, so that's a downstairs bedroom that's currently the lounge, and on the right you can see bedroom 2 upstairs. And then bedroom 3 also upstairs on the left, and the communal bathroom upstairs. Having checked the SPD guidelines, it is noted the combined living space has an under provision of 2.75 metres squared. However, given the size of all of the bedrooms, well above the minimum size standards, for the proposal is considered to be acceptable. Further, there were no objections raised by private sector housing. So the City Council's, sorry, a bit too far. The City Council's parking standards, SPD, sets the level of off-road parking facilities for new developments within the city, and places a requirement of 2 off-road spaces for Class C4 HMOs with 4 or more bedrooms. It should be noted that the expected level of parking for a Class C3 dwelling house with 3 or more bedrooms would also be 2 off-road spaces. So as such, it's not considered an objection on car parking standards could be sustained. And having regard to all these material considerations and planning policy, it is concluded that the development is acceptable and in accordance with PCS 23 of the Portsmouth Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Spooner, you have 6 minutes to address us.
Thank you. So good afternoon to everybody, and my thanks for helping me out with my timing today. So I'm here to give assurance that before the application was submitted, the criteria was researched to ensure the suitability of the proposal. The report prepared by the planning officer supports the criteria set out in planning regulations, HMO guidelines, along with the supplementary planning document that's recently been revised, showing all criteria have been met. As the application has adhered to all these requirements, my deputation is more to clarify detail and give assurance that concerns raised have already been considered. Questions have been raised over who will inhabit the property. It was always intended as a 3-person HMO. The property speaks for itself, being safe, well maintained, with good fixtures and fittings, and has been visited by the council planning as part of this process. The room sizes make for comfortable HMO living, attracting tenants that are looking for more than budget accommodation. As for noise concerns, the property would be inhabited by 3 adults, which is smaller than the average British family. The building is of sound construction with double glazing. There is an audible nuisance clause in the tenancy agreement that we use, which could be invoked if ever need arose. Finally, parking. It's a citywide issue, so it would be unfair to suggest that we are exasperating the already difficult parking arrangements. The view has been taken to position this rental property in a location where local amenities and public transport are at their best, including 10-minute bus routes servicing central Portsmouth, running past both hospitals and down to the Hard, a walk to the train station, all helping to alleviate the necessity for a car. A forecourt is present for a motorbike to park off-road and secure shed for the storage of bicycles. All feasible options for many in a city that is flat and compact. In conclusion, I'm an experienced landlord and have been inspected by a housing technical officer under the 2004 Housing Act for HMOs, and have always remained compliant and up to date with HMO legislation, so see no reason for the application not to receive full planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? Councillor Atkins.
Does condition 3 mean that the property will not ever be occupied by more than 3 people? Is it limited to 3 people? Completely, yeah. You'd have to apply for a new permission. Yeah.
If there are no other questions, comments, Councillor Stubbs, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, we get quite a number of HMO applications coming through here, and there are really, when we've been over this so many times now, there are really just 2 standards we need to look against. One is the 10% rule, and the other is room sizes. Well, we're clearly under the 10% rule here by quite a way, and I've not heard any evidence of any additional HMOs, so I think we have to accept that bar as being cleared. The other one is to do with space standards, and while this building, you know, on the numbers we've got here, does fall marginally short, we've got condition 3, and I've not seen that on any of these previous HMO applications, limiting the numbers to under the regular 5, limiting it to 3, and I think that's a very sensible trade-off. So I don't think we can make any case that this is an over-intensive use, and for that reason I would like to propose a report.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm happy to second that. I was going to propose myself, so more than happy to second Councillor Stubbs' proposal. I would just like one thing noted in the minutes, because I don't think we can't note it in the conditional permission because it's not relevant, but we do have a slight space standard, so I'd like it noted, if we can, in the minutes, if you agree, Chair, and the committee agree, that if this goes through today, we're granting permission because whilst the living arrangements don't provide the necessary space, the bedrooms overcompensate, so therefore overall, because otherwise what we're going to get potentially is other landlords who don't meet the living space and are just about on the money, or, you know, for the bedrooms using, well, hang on a minute, in Kingsley Road you allowed it when that living accommodation didn't quite meet, and it was 2.7 metres squared under, it's 2.75. So I think it would be great if we can minute that, so we can use that legally if we need to in the future when other people may try and stretch the boundaries somewhat, but I'm happy to support this.
Councillor Pitt.
I completely agree with what Donna just said, and would add my thoughts to that, she's right in that we have seen that sort of thing done before when people have cited a specific site and only used half of the argument around it and they've talked about the space standard for the living space, but not referred to bedroom sizes. So if we could be clear that that's why we're granting, you're completely right, Donna.
In which case, can I see those people who are in favour of the proposal? That is unanimous. You have your planning consent. Thank you. All right. Mr. Lane, is he here? Right. Right. Thank you. Councillor Pitt.
As the cabinet member, could I suggest that if the printer's broken, somebody fixes it, and I'm quite happy to find the money to do so, because it's making me feel ill looking at this.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt.
Could I just add a comment? We could get those 3D glasses, you know, the blue and the red ones, because I think that would work in this case.
Right. And before we have the officer's report, Mr. Smith, thank you very much for your very comprehensive and detailed letter. That does help the committee. It is very useful to get detailed letters. Whether we agree with them or not is neither here nor there, but it is very useful to us. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This is a City Council scheme for the replacement of an asbestos roof, the replacement of the communal stairs window, and the replacement of the boundary railings. So the application is for a three-storey 1960s residential flat block. The building is located on the southern side of High Street, west from its junction with Pembroke Road, and is within the Old Portsmouth Conservation Area, as well as being directly opposite the Grade 1 listed St Thomas's Cathedral. It is also located within PCS 9, the seafront. Policy PCS 9 of the Portsmouth Plan sets out the objectives for the seafront to revitalise the seafront while maintaining its existing character, and to protect and enhance the seafront's heritage assets. While the building is in a relatively good condition, it does require some alterations to ensure its long-term well-being. Given that the property is not an identified heritage asset, the principle of development is acceptable, subject to the alterations being of a high enough standard as to preserve or enhance the conservation area. Whilst 45A to J High Street is not considered to be of any specific architectural or historic interest, it nevertheless has some architectural features of merit, including a large cantilevered concrete window, and is an example of typical 1960s architecture. The proposal would replace the communal window, boundary railing and roof. So the proposal for the window is to retain the original cantilevered section, so the concrete frame, removing the existing single glazed steel glass unit and installing a new double glazed aluminium window that will be set back 1 metre into the inner skin of the brickwork, so away from the existing cantilevered concrete section. The original plans featured a different layout to the proposed that related poorly to the property. This has been amended so the window arrangement closely resembles that of the existing property, and although it is recessed, it is considered to represent an appropriate alteration that would preserve the character of the existing building. The existing Barbican cast style railings are 0.8 metres tall and do feature some corrosion. The proposed railings, replacement railings you can see at the bottom there, would also be of a similar design, powder coated black and be slightly taller at 1 metre. They would also feature a gate and completely enclose the front entrance of the building. But given the similar material, colour finish and design, this minor difference in terms of scale is considered to be acceptable. And further to this, the replacement would help to revitalise the appearance of the building and preserve the character of the conservation area. The proposal also includes replacing the existing asbestos roof with a flat roof. No, not with a flat roof, with a felt roof, sorry. The proposed replacement would follow the same profile as the existing and only represent a change in material. It is therefore not considered to present any significant change to the property's appearance and will preserve the surrounding heritage assets. Overall, it is considered that the alterations would have a minor visual impact to the property and maintain the existing appearance and character of the building within its setting, and that the alterations are considered to be of a suitable quality to lift the visual appearance of the building and preserve the character and appearance of the old Portsmouth conservation area, and is in accordance with PCS 9 of the Portsmouth Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith and Mr. Lane, you will each have 6 minutes. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mr. Smith. I live at 45F the High Street, which is the one with the window box on the first floor on the right-hand side on the far right. I'll take each one of the proposals in turn. Replacement of the communal stairs window. The existing single glazed window is mounted at the front of the cantilevered window frame. The proposed window is set back and mounted over the internal brick wall. The cantilevered frame would stick out without a window, exposing the internal concrete structure to salt water and frost. The proposed decorative aluminium sheet only serving to trap moisture and hide the damage underneath. The wider, thicker frame necessary to support double glazed units and the double glazing itself would reduce light levels in the stairwell, making the stairwell appear darker from outside and destroying the current lightweight, slender, transparent appearance of the bay window, a distinctive and attractive feature characteristic of 1950s and 60s architecture. Building regulations do not require single glazing in unheated communal areas to be replaced by double glazing in every case. The existing window should be renovated or replaced with an identical single glazed window in exactly the same position. The proposed design exposes the base, sides and top underside of the cantilevered concrete window frame and the front outer bevel channel in the concrete designed for the window. Mounted on the internal brick wall, the proposed design exposes 2 strips of the outside wall within the cantilevered frame, on the east side and on the west side, including the downpipe from the window roof. I have some photographs which show this detail. You can't possibly see it on that photograph. To even the most casual observer, it would be apparent. The window is missing. Sorry, you can't see it on that photograph either. Bottom right, it's hidden. There's a downpipe inside the window. The proposed design would look ridiculous. The existing window should be renovated or replaced with an identical single glazed window in exactly the same position. Replacement of asbestos roof with a flat felt roof. There is no evidence in the external condition report that the roof needs replacing. There is no evidence in the external condition report that the roof material is softening or cracking or that the fixings are corroding. The soffit, and this may be, you could say those are not planning issues, but this, we get to a possibly, I think this is possibly a planning thing. The soffit is in excellent condition, but the roof and fascia are stained, and covered with moss and lichens. Replacing the roof with felt and the fascia with UPVC would address these aesthetic defects, but at great cost to the leaseholders. There is no evidence in the external condition report that the roof needs replacing. Replacement boundary rail. The proposal is to demolish the brick piers and replace 2 fence panels with a 1 metre high continuous fence and gate. The brick piers are solid. The brick piers are a modest architectural design feature that define the front entrance and match in proportion the cantilevered bay window. The brick piers are a place to sit and a place to rest heavy parcels. The brick piers are an attractive and useful feature. The existing railing is made from solid metal. The railing is an original feature that could be restored. The proposed railing is featureless, except in that the panels appear to be upside down. There are many interesting quality boundary fences around council flats in Portsmouth. It is very puzzling why such a low standard is proposed in Old Portsmouth as part of a £300,000 refurbishment scheme. The proposed fence extends the full width of the building, changing the open and welcoming aspect of the entrance. The gate, right on the step, would be a persistent irritation for leaseholders. The step, a hazard for visitors. The description of the existing railing in the committee report is not correct. The existing design is not plain. The existing design has alternate exposed pales and an unusual continuous strip metal rail. The existing fence is not 0.8 metres high. The height of alternate pales is 0.75 metres. The height of the top rail is only 0.69 metres. The proposed fence, top rail and pales are all 1 metre high, 0.31 metres or 1 foot higher than the existing top rail. The claim in the committee report that this is a minor difference in terms of scale is questionable. The plan in the committee report, which we're looking at now, does not correctly show the height of the proposed fence. The top of the rail of the proposed fence would be higher up, level or above the ground floor window sills. The proposed design is not made of appropriate materials. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I've gone over.
You're going over.
Okay, I've only got 3 sentences left, sorry. The proposed design is not made of appropriate materials. The proposed design is made of steel tube. The metal post and rails are 2 millimetres thick. The metal plate's only 1.5 millimetres thick. The manufacturer does not recommend powder-coated steel tube in coastal areas. The claim in the committee report that a plain fence would help revitalise the appearance of the building and preserve the appearance of the conservation area is not credible. The manufacturer's catalogue features the proposed fence around a cycle shed. The brick piers should not be demolished and the existing fence should be refurbished. Thank you. Thank you very much. I apologise for
With you, sir. Mr. Lane, you have 6 minutes, plus or minus about 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the committee for obviously allowing our deputation today. My name is Stuart Lane, and I'm a plan maintenance surveyor with Portsmouth City Council. As you're obviously aware, Portsmouth City Council owns a number of buildings, and obviously we look to actively maintain those and keep those in good condition. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context today about our involvement. So I'm sure as many of you are aware, we have a comprehensive stock database which manages condition of our property stock. That's managed by individual property managers in individual areas. The particular asset in question today has been highlighted by one of our property managers that it's in a poor condition. This may not mean that the whole building top to bottom is poor, but that certain elements of it are in poor condition. Consequently, when this occurs, or when something is noted to be in poor condition, effectively then the building gets passed to the plan team to be evaluated as part of a planned maintenance scheme. which is the situation we're in today. A surveyor will then be assigned to that building, and they will undertake a full survey of the building, assessing all the elements, and pull together or compile a scheme which will address obviously all the poor elements. We're also looking at addressing sort of fair elements where they could run into degradation over the next few years, and also at the same time we take into consideration any statutory requirements such as fire safety. So with all those things in mind, we'll compile a scheme. When we're looking at individual elements such as the window, the roof, the railings, etc., we will make a number of considerations, and we will take a holistic view of the building and the nature of each repair or improvement. We'll consider a number of things such as the condition at the time, we'll consider life cycle costs, we'll consider the ease of maintenance, health and safety concerns, and we'll consider structural load-ins. We'll also assess the opportunity to undertake works at that particular time, and as mentioned earlier, we'll also consider bringing in statutory provisions such as improving fire safety. If I could quickly just touch on some of the structural bits. So, whereas I do appreciate Mr. Smith's comments, and they don't go amiss, I think the difficulty here, and this is the important bit to understand, whereas I think we'd love to be able to put a replica window back in the same place. The issue that we have is, in discussion with the structural engineer, he has confirmed that the original design, as it is, cannot be proven to sit on the cantilevered structure. Consequently, it's under-designed. The window is under-designed, or the cantilevered structure is under-designed for the window itself. As principal designers of a scheme, obviously we need to consider health and safety, we need to consider building regulations applications, and the like when we're trying to replicate or implement a new repair or an improvement. And like I say, I don't dismiss Mr. Smith's comments at all, and I think it's a reasonable assessment. But in this instance, we will not be able to put back a window in the same location because we cannot prove that the cantilever structure will take it. That's the difficulty that we've got, and that's why we've come up with a design that we have. I think that's our fundamental concern. In terms of the brick piers, I do understand again Mr. Smith's concerns, but I think a little bit of that is also acknowledging as principal designer that we are creating now a bit of a lip on the cantilever structure, and we recognise that. The process of taking down the piers is effectively to assist or to reduce the risk of maybe people trying to get on the pier and onto the cantilevered structure. So again, it's about trying to minimise risk in the role of principal designer. In terms of the railings, they are in poor condition, and in our opinion, they're beyond economic repair. Consequently, we need to look at a replacement to retain the aesthetic of the building and to maintain a defensible boundary. Again, while I appreciate the new Barbican style is slightly different to the original, again, we as principal designer, we need to consider elements such as health and safety. So the small ball bearings on the top, again, would prevent people from impaling themselves, etc. So we've got to take into consideration those as well. Again, like I say, we don't discount issues of cost. So the aluminium powder coated railing is obviously more cost effective or is less initial outlay in terms of a solid steel replacement. So we are thinking about the leaseholders and the budget holders in mind there. In terms of the roof, I don't think there's any impact. As mentioned already by the planning officer, the pitch won't change. It's only a change of material. So we don't, well, in my opinion, there will be no overall change to the aesthetic of the building. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Right, thank you very much for your deputations. Both were very clear. Members, questions? Councillor Atkins.
Are we allowed to ask those making deputations questions? No.
They are matters of substance, yes.
Yeah, I was curious to know why the gate has been introduced and the railings going all the way across the entrance when they weren't in the original.
Yeah, the gates, just an introduction to the boundary to keep it as a defensible space, and will open in line with the front door.
Also thinking a question from me. One of the matters which has been raised is the life expectancy of the felting on the roof and the need to replace that after a number of years. That was both alluded to in the deputation and made very clear in some of the letters which were received on this matter. Could you advise on life expectancy of roofs?
The issue that we're looking at is actually the replacement of the roof itself and the visual impact upon that. The life expectancy of the roof is not a material planning consideration because it's something that would be for the people who are maintaining the property to take into consideration. It's not something that we would consider as part of the planning application.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Atkins?
Mr. Smith's deputation mentioned the idea that the manufacturer of the railings doesn't recommend them for coastal areas. Is that something we are able to take into account or not really?
No.
Members, any further questions? If not, comments? Is that a question or a comment, Councillor?
It's a question, Chair.
Thank you.
We had some concern raised about the effect that the recessing that window will have as a result of exposing the concrete. Has anyone done any assessment on that at all? Because actually, before Mr. Smith mentioned it, it went through my mind as well. So I'm just wondering whether that's any assessment's been done on it.
Mr. Manley?
From our perspective, what we're looking at in terms of is the impact of the changes to the building, the actual function of the building subsequently and how that relates to building control and structurally operates is not for us to consider. We're just looking at how it impacts. It is one of our applications. It is something you can raise outside of planning application as elected member with the relevant department in terms of that issue, but from a planning perspective, it's not something we would be, which would be material to consideration in the application.
Okay, second question. There is I think what's bothering me a little bit about this whole application is it feels a bit, I'm not quite sure why it needed to be designed, why it wasn't just repair, because the proposed new window design, I know it says it's an indicative design in the plans, but I'm not sure if the residents haven't requested it and nobody else has thought about it, why somebody's had the bright idea of putting shaped windows on both sides of it, which has got nothing to do with the historic nature of the building. So that is a material consideration, isn't it? Because it's a visual change, and if it's only indicative, are we able to give any steer as to whether it should retain the original concept or not?
The application in front of you, if you are concerned that you would like for it to be retained in its original appearance, that may actually generate problems, but I mean the point about it is the application in front of us should actually be representative of what's going in. So if you wish it to be replicate what's there at the moment, that's in something you can actually require to be conditioned.
Interested in what other members think.
Well, whilst they're thinking, a question from the chair. One of the elements which has not been raised is the removal of the existing tile finish, which, as you can see from the bottom right hand picture, is very distinctive, and replacing it merely with render. Is there a conservation area view on the removal of so distinctive a feature within a conservation area?
Yes, Chair. That was part of the original proposal. After subsequent negotiations, the tiles will be retained as part of the application.
So, members, you may note that on the page in front of you, that where it says remove existing tile finish and replace with render, that may be deleted. And right, so no further questions, comments from members, please. Councillor Udi, then Councillor Jones.
I've got a broad range of things to say over this. I'm in love with post-war social housing architecture, so this building I absolutely adore. I don't particularly like this planning application. I agree that you have to have the roof replaced because there's asbestos. The safety features of the railings I get because it's 2019. My concern over the cantilevered section and the window is that I would love it to remain that it is. Maybe bring it back forward and replace it with, I guess, we're moving to double glazed windows because of energy saving and just being generally conscious about what we do these days. I was going to bring up the tile section, but I'm glad that has been resolved almost immediately because that is a fabulous part of the building. I just want to make a point about spending money on Portsmouth City Council owned buildings. Whilst this is social housing, it's in Old Portsmouth and it's in quite an affluent area, and I represent a ward that has a significant amount of Portsmouth City Council owned buildings. I have people begging to have their front doors replaced because they haven't been changed in 20 years, and flat blocks, especially the courts, are in dire need. The courts in Lamport are in dire need of renovation, and I'm quite frankly upset that money's being spent down here and I don't really see it get spent significantly in areas that I represent. But I just need to make that point because this is an application from Portsmouth City Council and I reserve the right to be critical. I want to thank Mr Smith for your objections, but I clearly can't see any way why this can be refused today because your building is in need of repair, especially over the roof incident. I don't know if any of my colleagues would be willing to try and say something over the window because I'd like it retained at the front and not a metre back in, but I would appreciate anyone's help, but thank you.
Councillor Donna Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm proposing the officer's recommendation, take on board the deputations today and members' comments. The railings, I think, create a nice sense of distinction for that particular building by having a continuous railing with a gate in the middle. The roof is no change to the design at all. It's about the material on the roof, and the only reason that is coming forward is because it's in a conservation area. This building, anywhere else in the city, if it was outside of a conservation area, of course, would not therefore be subject to planning. The window, it's a tricky one, but we have to bear in mind, and we've had quite a good explanation from the housing officer as to why the window is being recessed, because even though it is a current refurbishment of an existing 1960 style protruding window on that block of apartments, on that block of flats, you do have to comply with building regulations even if you are refurbishing an existing building. And so actually for me, you know, if you're putting a new window in, the council as the freeholder has to be satisfied that it is safe. I think what would have been a travesty would have been if the window had been recessed and the concrete frame of the window, the existing protruding frame, was also removed. I think that would have been a real, as Councillor Udy just said, she likes this kind of post-war architecture. That would have really changed, I think, the aesthetic of the building. So the fact it's being recessed, it's not ideal. I see what Mrs Smith is saying, but I think in view of the explanation we've had, it's probably the most sensible thing to happen. I'm pleased the tiles are remaining. I think that they are an attractive feature and certainly add to be much more interesting than plain render. And again, it's in keeping with that 1960s architecture. So whilst I appreciate the window is not grey, I understand that there is a bit of a tension there. I think on balance of the whole application, you know, I'd be happy to support the officer's recommendation. And just as an aside point for Councillor Udy, just to bear in mind that anyone who lives in that block that's bought their flat will have to pay a percentage. Yeah. So there'll be some more money for your front doors.
Councillor, just conferring amongst ourselves, and it's been raised at the point that the drawing number 3, revision B, gives an indicative design. We think that the appropriate way to deal with that issue is to amend condition 2 so that any final design to be implemented must be approved by the local planning authority on an officer level in design terms. Is that something that members would be willing to endorse?
Would you be willing to endorse that?
My proposal doesn't include any change to the design of the windows, by the way. I don't think you need to necessarily feature on that bit at this time unless anyone else raises it. So as it is what we're happy with.
The difficulty I have is that on the plans that will be binding in the condition, the word indicative design is used, which gives free rein.
What do you suggest then?
That final approval of the design in accordance with those plans is delegated to officers.
That's very sensible.
Councillor Stubbs, then Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I think a lot of the concern from leaseholders about this is really that the council is being extravagant with their money on some of the works that it is doing. And that may well be a legitimate criticism. We're not in a position to say sitting here, but it is something which we can't deal with through planning. So whether the roof, asbestos roof, needs replacing now or not is not something the planning committee can consider, only whether its visual appearance has changed, which it won't have done. So these are not matters for planning, but they're very much matters for the council and for the cabinet member for housing. And I would hope that this matter can be raised with him. Certainly, I would be happy to do that, or perhaps better from one of your ward members. But I mean, this is something that ought to be looked at to ensure that good value for money is being obtained. But we can't use that as a reason to decline planning consent for when we're only really considering the visuals at this particular part of the council. So I will support the application. I'm not sure if Councillor Jones's proposition has been seconded, but if not, I'm happy to second.
You have seconded it. Councillor Atkins.
Yeah, I think Councillor Stubbs actually covered a great deal of what I was going to say, which is I have a lot of sympathy with Mr. Smith's position. I think it's a shame that modern updates and modern health and safety rules require the removal of a quite fine single glazed window, but I think if the work has been done and there's a concern about the weight of the window placed at the front, I think it does need replacing. So unfortunately, I think the setback proposal seems sensible. I also have a lot of sympathy with the idea that a lot of money is being spent on this, but it's for the manager of the building to determine necessity of repair, and it's not a planning issue. So while I can see that a lot of money is being spent and there is some things that will be lost in terms of the modern update and the material of the railings, these aren't really planning issues, and it's, modern requirements, I think, are dictating this. I don't see any grounds for refusing it on the basis of planning rules and appearance.
Right, members, you have a proposition which has been proposed and seconded, and it has been accepted by Councillor Jones that we add to condition 2 that it is subject to the approval of the local planning authority in relation to the design of the casement window on plan 003 revision B. With that addition, can I see those members who are in favour of the proposition? That is 5. Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. You have your planning permission. Thank you. Thank you very much for your deputations. I believe, Councillor Jones, you are withdrawing for this final item. Thank you very much for your contribution to the debate today. Mr. Pickup, will you please come to the table?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So, the application site is made up of a relatively small section of the football club's car park to the north of Fratton Park Stadium. Immediately to the east of the site is an electricity substation with the wider car park area to the west. Towards the north is light industrial site with various commercial uses. Beyond the eastern boundary of a wider football site is residential development, and beyond the western boundary is a Tesco store. The application is for repurposing of the existing 41-metre high lattice floodlight column located within the northwest corner of Fratton Park, and its resiting within the northeast corner of the adjacent car park to the north. The lattice floodlight column would be reduced by 7 metres to 34 metres in height. The proposal would result in removal of the individual lamps but retain the rectangular shaped head frame. Okay, let's go in there, and that's the floodlight which will be repositioned. The resiting of the lattice column to the northeast corner of the car park would also necessitate the enclosure of a small area of land at the foot of the column. The means of enclosure would comprise of a 2-metre high steel palisade fence, which is required to secure the column and to prevent access by unauthorised persons. The purpose of the application was twofold. A, to retain the football heritage of one of the 4 floodlighting columns, and B, to provide lighting of a car park. The lighting aspect has been deleted from the proposal during the course of the application, so rendering redundant consultations with ecology, highways and environmental health. The club have verbally stated that lighting will instead be provided on the north elevation of the north stand subject to planning permission. The applicant has stated that the traditional floodlight column is a feature that many football fans associate with football grounds and with Portsmouth Football Club in particular. Consequently, the club wishes to retain the area's rich football heritage by relocating one of the existing floodlight columns into the north car park. Whilst it is proposed to remove the light bulbs from a rectangular head of the column, the structure would retain its iconic shape and profile, acting as a visual reference point to fans making their way to the ground. It is accepted that the floodlights are an iconic part of the city's landscape and are synonymous with the football club. Although there would only be 1 column, not 4, and it would be sited outside the stadium, the justification for retention and relocation is considered to be a reasonable one, enabling the club to retain a part of its sporting heritage whilst conforming with modern standards and requirements with new lighting in the stadium. The lattice tower would be sited further away from residential properties than the existing structure and would still be seen in the context of the football club. Furthermore, due to the commercial nature of the surrounding area to the north and west, it is not considered that the development would be intrusive or out of keeping. The site lies within a spur of PCS 11 employment designated land, where the policy seeks to promote employment development and protect existing. It is not considered the relocated column would be prejudicial to PCS 11, especially as it could be moved at a later date where wider development proposals needed for that piece of land. With regard to residential amenity, it is considered that the resited lattice column would have little, if any, impact on local residents' enjoyment of their homes. The resited lattice column would be some 45 to 50 metres to the west of the rear elevations of the residential properties in Alveston Road. The current separation distance between Alveston Road properties further to the south and the floodlights in question is between 20 and 30 metres. Due to the open lattice construction of a floodlight, it is not considered that the proposed development would result in a loss of outlook or a pier overbearing. This is further aided by the separation distance between the tower and these neighbours. Furthermore, the tower would be 7 metres less in height than the existing structure. It is therefore considered the proposed amendment would not be harmful to neighbour amenity. All other matters are set out in the officer's report. It is therefore contended that the application, as proposed, would preserve the character and appearance of the football stadium and surrounding area, would be proportionate to and in keeping with its purpose and function, and would not result in unacceptable harm to residential amenities of the adjoining neighbours. The development would therefore comply with the objectives of the MPPF and the requirements of policy PCS 23 of the Portsmouth Plan.
Thank you. Mr. Pickup, you have 6 minutes to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. As members will be aware from your officer's presentation, this application seeks to grant of planning permission for the repurposing of the existing floodlight column currently located in the stadium's northwest corner to the northeast corner of the club's main car park. The club are currently planning a number of changes to the ground and have, at the beginning of this week, submitted a second application for the construction of a replacement TV camera gantry and floodlighting to the roof of the south stand. The club is therefore in the process of decommissioning all of the existing floodlight columns, as they will no longer be required for the lighting of the pitch. As has been explained in your officer's report, the club are extremely keen to ensure that there remains at Fratton Park a reference to the important part the club has played in the evolution of the modern game with the introduction of pitch floodlighting. On the 22nd of February 1956, Fratton Park hosted the first ever floodlit football match. This was against Newcastle United, which sadly they lost 2-0. As a reference to the important part the club has played in the development of the game, they want to retain one of the existing floodlight columns by relocating it to the northeast corner of the north car park. Whilst the floodlight lamps would be removed, the iconic shape of the floodlight, the column and the rectangular head would be retained, helping to guide fans to Fratton Park on match days. At the time of the submission of the application, it was proposed to illuminate the car park by attaching an array of lights to the column at a height of 18 metres above ground level. However, on reflection, the club did not like the way the horizontal crossarm looked on the column, believing that it distracted from the iconic and historic character of the structure, so deleted it from the scheme. In conclusion, it is hoped that members of the committee will support the club in its endeavours to improve Fratton Park, whilst at the same time enabling it to retain part of its rich football heritage, with the resiting of this column into the northeast corner of the adjacent car park. The removal of the floodlight columns and the rationalisation of the club's floodlighting system, which would be much lower than the existing, would have the added benefit of reducing light spill from the stadium, which in turn would significantly improve residential amenity in the area. As such, it is respectfully requested that members of the Planning Committee follow your officer's recommendation and grant this application planning permission. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pickup. Members, questions? Members, comments? Councillor Stubbs, Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I'm going to support this application. I will propose it. Just as a comment, though, I do wonder somewhat about the logic. I mean, floodlights are very much an iconic part of sports stadiums, but when you see 4 of them in the corners of the ground, I think one on its own, which without lighting on it, may end up looking more like a telecommunications mast. However, that's a matter for the club, really. If they wish to retain it, then I don't see any planning reason why we wouldn't. Against that, it's not a problem if they want to have it as effectively as a piece of public art. Therefore, I propose the report.
Thank you. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Councillor Stubbs is saying. I think they are iconic. I think when you go across the country, you often will spot football grounds and things, and they're very, very visual, and I think it's important for our city to retain some of those iconic kind of features there, which are rich with the city's football heritage. The key thing for me is that it has little to no impact on the residents that's there, so I think there are no real grounds for refusal here. I'm happy to second. I know on a personal note, my daughter likes going up on the hill and being able to spot various things across the city. I know others do in as well, and it'd be nice for those sort of things to stay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pitt.
Just a light-hearted remark, Chair. The 22nd of February happens to be my birthday, and I've known all my life, because my father's a football fanatic, that the first floodlit game happened at Fratton Park on the 22nd of February. So I'm glad that that little bit of a reminder for me every year, and I don't think it's a declarable interest, unless they're going to put candles on it next year to honour the occasion, in which case it might be. So it's nice to see that reference there, because it might actually remind my father to buy me a birthday card.
Are you fishing for a plaque, Councillor Pitt? Is that what it is?
From the chair, I must say, as someone who was not brought up in Portsmouth and so is not by nature have Portsmouth Football Club carved on me, it's somewhat perplexing, but if they want to do it, why not? Any further comments? Okay, those in favour. That is unanimous. You can... Thank you very much, members. Thank you very much, officers, for your support. That concludes the meeting.